up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Kinda Different, a podcast where we talk about innovation. We connect with some absolutely amazing guests, and we talk about how we can make dental care more human, all of us together. I'm Matt Allen, CEO and co-founder of DifferentKind, and I am super excited to have with us today Jodi Evans, who is the founder, CEO of RevTribes, and the amazing work that they are doing in the dental ecosystem. Excited to hear her perspective, have us learn from her experience, and really just kind of get to understand how she thinks about these kind of topics as it relates to really improving dental care in general. So, Jodi, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. I would love for you to kind of start off just by introducing a little bit more about yourself, giving us a little bit more depth on the very brief intro that I just shared.
Okay, very cool. So first of all, I want to say thank you, Matt, for having me on here. And I just want to tell a story really quick. So Matt's amazing. He reached out to me on LinkedIn, I think it was, and gave me this awesome album, which is sitting. I don't have a lot of decorations in my office, but I have that sitting up on the shelf underneath because I was like, okay, remember that people see you. And that sometimes I feel like that you sent me something around innovation. You sent me the Beatles album, and I was like, I don't know, for me, it almost makes me emotional, but it was just like a way of being seen. And I don't see myself that way. And so when you sent that, I was like, okay, that's really helped me. So I think you just have a gift for seeing people and lifting people up and really taking your culture to the next level. So I admire you so much. And I'm really excited about this podcast that you're doing. But if you haven't interacted with Matt, like, you just got to talk to him. It doesn't even matter. Like, just call him and just have a conversation, because I just think you have so much genius to share, and you do it in such an uplifting way. So anyways, thankful for you, my friend.
Thank you for that. It's very kind of you. But this isn't about me. This is about you. Tell us about RevTribes. Tell us about who you are, what you're doing. We want to hear about that. Thank you for those kind words, though.
Yeah, of course. So like, I think the passion for RevTribes really is to help dental tribes win and achieve their goals. And so our biggest mantra is your vision, your way. We live in a very abundant environment, which we're grateful for. And while that's amazing, it can also create some confusion, or this idea of like, if I'm not like somebody else, then I must be failing. And so we want to create an environment where entrepreneurs in the dental space are free to be themselves, create a vision that works for them so they stay in the game long term, and then build that tribe so they can get where they want to go. I mean, that in a nutshell, it's just like, how do we help you get where you want to go?
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. And there's a lot of like framework to that and whatever, and maybe we'll get into that, maybe we won't. But if we don't, you definitely should reach out to Jodi to find out about that. But yeah, thank you for kind of giving us a little depth there. Let's jump in, and since we've already been talking a little bit about it, or you already mentioned innovation in terms of, Revolver from the Beatles, one of the most innovative albums of all time.
So awesome, by the way. And my kids' friends think I'm really cool. Just so you know, they came over and I was like, look what I got. And they're like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. So anyways, thanks
there
for
you go.
making
Right.
me cooler.
It is amazing how cool the Beatles still are. Even, that album came out in, I think, 1966. Right. So how many ever years that is later still makes you really cool if you listen to the Beatles. Awesome. Well, let's talk a little bit about innovation. And I think that one of the spaces where I really see RevTribes innovating is really kind of understanding. You tend to talk about it in terms of superpowers, but you have some kind of things that I think you're focusing on, and things that you're tending to understand about people to start with. That to me is, it doesn't feel like it should be innovative, right? It's rooted in the like best way of that term, right? It's radical, like from the Latin word radix, right? Of radish, right? Like rooted. And it's really rooted, but I do think a lot of people have forgotten about that, right? A lot of people are living without roots in our modern era. And so I think you understanding this in terms of what RevTribes does and how you think about people first. So can you just tell us in terms of, how you see why that is innovative in the dental space? Maybe you're like, I don't know if that's innovative, but I certainly see it that way. Tell us, kind of how you think about that and why you feel like that lays the foundation for everything else that comes after it.
Well, thank you so much for that question, because obviously it's hitting on something I'm passionate about. So the foundation, is people, vision, and then systems. And I actually just read a thing from Harvard that talked about how people actually sign up for working for the person, and then they understand the vision. So like, it does start with people. I don't know if it's innovative, but I think it is kind of a weird way to look at the dental space, because you can be not great at people and do pretty good for a little while. So the approach that we take though is if you want to go far, you gotta understand the people component. And so
Mm,
um the thing that hit me isn't there's a couple of places where I've learned that people impact the space. The first one is that um I have found that people do not want to work for the smartest person, they want to be the
mm,
smartest person in the room. So if you can facilitate an environment where brilliant people can show up and can be seen and heard and can participate, I think it gives you a competitive advantage. And I learned
mm,
that from being in a call center that was all Spanish speaking, and I do not speak Spanish. And my job was to turn it around. And so immediately I had to use that principle of how can I see people and then help them utilize their genius to get where we want to go.
mm,
And but this comes up in every interaction that you're having with people. And I just think that especially with COVID and everything, the good that came out of that was people started evaluating and saying, what do I genuinely want? And they're looking for leaders that see them
mm,
and can facilitate an environment that lets them get more of what they want from a place of being able to multiply their own genius and collaborate effectively without having to be like super brilliant with people. So we try to simplify that down to a data set
mm.
and give people tools to support some of that connection and that ability to be seen. So that's where we start.
I absolutely love that. And I feel like, man, that there's the word that I'm hearing in a lot of that is a lot of self-awareness, both from the
Mm-hmm.
perspective of the leader, but also from the people who are working, in that organization, wherever that might be. And you mentioned a couple of tools, and I think we would be remiss if we didn't talk a little bit about Enneagram and Kolbe and some of these tools that you do use, because I think that there's so much depth there, and at least from the perspective, I'm not as familiar with Kolbe, but from the Enneagram perspective, there's this like
Mm-hmm.
really long history of back to monks, right, who were like using this idea of how do we understand who we are so that we can understand each other and so that we can move forward together. So can you just tell us a little bit more about maybe each of those tools and kind of
Sure.
how that helps us to understand both ourselves and those around us?
Yeah, I'd love to. So there's three parts of the mind. You have the cognitive part, which is, your intelligence and your skills. And then you have this affective side. That's your personality. And that can evolve and definitely morph. Like what motivates you can shift, but that's things like the Myers-Briggs, the Enneagram, Clifton Strength Finders, things like that. And then you have cognitive. And so those are the three parts of our mind. That's it. And cognitive is the Kolbe. It's how you take action.
Mm,
So what I love about the Kolbe is it measures one part and it doesn't mix in personality or intelligence. So it's not what you can do and can't do. It just says when you go to solve problems, this is how you take action, free to
mm,
be yourself. And when you're not free to be yourself and take action in a way that works well for you, it causes mental stress.
mm,
And so having a neurological issues, I found that understanding my Kolbe really helped prevent and keep at bay some of the neurological reactions that I was having before. I really understood how to accelerate my cognitive strengths. So I treat everybody like they have a disability. Um, because I'm like, everybody feels mental stress. It just comes up differently. I fall over. So I think that I don't care who you are, um, falling over teaches you things. Like you'd have to be really stubborn to not learn from that. But I find that everybody's got something that's trying to tell them, hey, you need to protect your cognitive strength,
yeah,
of how you like to solve problems.
yeah,
And I like that. I like being
totally.
able to understand it.
Yeah, well, it's just such an empathetic approach, I think, in general, right? And I think that as we talk about making dental care more human, like with our patients, right? You're talking about that, I think, with teams and understanding the people that are around you, and it's such a profound way, I think, to move out of thinking about ourselves into thinking about others and how are they responding and who are they and these certain ways. And I think it's just is a really, yeah, like it's a self-forgetful way of approaching situations, which I think all good leaders tend to do, right? They tend to say like, what does my team need? What do people around me need? Instead of what do I need?
Hmm. Well, and there's a okay, so like that is like, yes, I'm a good person, right? But there's actually this other component of If you think about the production formula or top line in dental, it's 3 core customers coming together and getting along really well. And that's your doctors, your staff or your team, and the patients. And
Mm.
so understanding the people component actually accelerates the business.
Yeah.
But I do systems last, and that's because it's like the people part is what makes the systems work well. And of course, we talk about the superpower of people and process, which is just something that I've evaluated over time. I'm sure there's something out there. I just haven't found it yet. But we talk about people and process as like different strains. And when you get to the system side, you have to have both. I like the people side. I have to hire people that, hold people more accountable to the process side.
Yep.
But it's that marriage of those two. That's what gets your production up.
Mm.
Is being able to understand how the team and the patients and the doctor are going to come together in an aligned way. And
Yeah.
there's so much talk about retention.
Mm.
And I'm like, people change. I'm not sure that's as important as alignment.
Mm.
I think alignment matters more. And whether that aligns inside your company or you align and you help them find a different solution, like I think that's what matters. And that's where superpowers come in. It's like the power that's alignment, and then systems work well when teams are aligned.
Yeah, totally.
So
I think that's more that, like, I think we see some dysfunction when people tend to talk about their teams as like family and whatever, right? Because you can't fire your family, right? But when you talk about that like high performing
I
team,
mean,
I
you
think
can, but that's just another experience. Yeah, done that
it
before.
doesn't go very well, right?
Yeah. Thanksgiving's not fun for a hot minute, for
Yeah,
sure.
exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, to your point, I think that like when we look at high performing teams, right, it is about that like alignment and whatnot. That hey, you have a lot of people with different skill sets, and now they're aligned and able to achieve this ultimate
Yes.
goal, which is providing excellent patient care that hopefully grows the business so that more people can receive excellent care, right? It's not just about making money, right? It's about hey, like let's continue to bring this model to more and more people so that we all win together. Like you said, you have three parts of that system for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. Okay. So I think that, some of that you mentioned kind of a few pieces of yourself there. And obviously just, even starting off talking about this in terms of why this is innovative, some of that comes back to you, right, as the founder and as the person who is, ultimately shaping the vision for this. So I just want to hear a little bit more about you because I think you have a fascinating story and I think you have a lot to share with people who may not know you. But I would love for maybe just you to share something with us that's important to you that you think people don't know about. So like they might not just click on your LinkedIn or something and be like, oh yeah, that's who Jodi is. But something that's important to you that you feel like you're obviously comfortable sharing, but people may not know.
Hmm. I don't know. That's a really hard question, and I love it. I love that question. That's a really good one. Um, I think for me, I don't know. I think maybe I'm assuming a lot of people know my cataplexy story. I don't know. But I would say aside from that, like I grew up with a very severe ADD,
Mm.
and it was probably one of the best things that happened to me because I began to see intelligence differently. I got medication my senior year of high school, and I went from almost failing out of high school. And I was like the quiet ADD kid, but my mind was never like in the classroom. And people thought I was smart because I was quiet. So there's a
Mm.
lot of assumptions around that. And, the teacher and I knew what was really going on. And I remember going to my parents and be like, I'm just going to drop out. And they were like, what? And so they got me help. And all of a sudden I got medication. And for me, that that worked for me really well. I got some behavioral therapy and then medication, and all of a sudden I went from like bottom of my class failing to 4.0 and then 4.0 in college, and I was able to like kind of step back and be like, everything that we're doing is a game.
Mm.
And intelligence exists differently and in different forms and in different ways, and even never knew I was going to end up in dentistry or where I'm at today. But even at that stage of my life, I was like, I never want anyone to ever feel it's like stupid ever.
Yeah.
Like I
Yeah.
want everyone to see their genius, and
Mm.
just became obsessed with that. Went into communication and cognitive development and things like that to try to really understand, this idea that intelligence shows up in different ways. And of course, I'm old and that was over 20 something years ago. There's been so much progress made in this area, but it didn't really come from the cataplexy. It actually came from being ADD that triggered that passion. And then the cataplexy, which is actually connected to ADD, accelerated the platform for me, because then you fall over and they're like, okay, I got to do something about this, because otherwise, me personally, I think the depression would have overcome me. And I don't know if I would have kept going. And so I had to see life and contribution differently. I was like workaholic, and I was like, I can do anything. And that drove me to like total imbalance. And then cataplexy, where it's like, now I have to do the things that matter most. And so, yeah, that's maybe what people don't know about me, but that's why I'm oddly obsessed with it.
I absolutely love it. And if you get the chance to meet Jodi at a meeting or something like that, you definitely should buy her coffee and have her tell you more of her story. It's really beautiful. And I think you have such a unique perspective because of your story that really we could all really learn from. So thank you. Thank you for sharing a little bit about that. One of the pieces that I think maybe is kind of related to that is, I feel like what you just said is I had to really focus on, what's most important. I can't do everything. When you look back at your life, and this doesn't have to be just professionally, but what is something that you just look back at it and say, man, I'm so proud of this. Like, this is something that, I've really done. I've really achieved. I've really accomplished. That you feel just like, wow, like I didn't ever imagine myself getting here, and here I am. What's something that you're super proud
of? Honestly, like, I'm really grateful for the relationships I've have in my life. I've worked hard for them. My husband and I got married very young, and thought we knew a lot. And I can just tell you, I didn't even know that I had to pay for electricity. Like, it's amazing we didn't die, that I didn't starve to death or whatever. But relationships have been a lot of work for me. I think there's some components of like being a high green and always wanting to be in the future, challenger, enthusiast on the Enneagram. It's like there's a lot coming at you if you hang out with Jodi. So I think that my marriage, we're total opposites, and not on the Colby, but on everything else, upbringing, and I mean, tons of therapy. Relationships have been hard for me because of how I show up. And so I've had to learn a lot about how do you connect, how do you stay present when your mind's always in the future. And so I'm proud of that work, because I've had to pour a lot of work into it. I love being like codependent. For me, I want to just give my power to my spouse or to anybody that will take it. And so I've had to work a ton on taking ownership for my life and for my relationships. And so, I mean, that's super vulnerable, but I've been blessed with parents that were breaking the cycles of abuse and alcoholism, and demonstrated that for me in my teenage years, and really set an example. Sorry, it's like what they've done with their life. There's no comparison to what I've been able to do. Meaning like they've blown me away, and I'm just trying to do half of what they've done. But they've introduced me to like there's better ways of living, and so I'm really grateful for the tools that have been given to me and the time I've taken to like try to utilize those. I'm not great at it yet, but I have a passion for like continually getting better. So yeah, I'm proud of it because it's like right here all the time. I'm like, grow. There's always opportunities. Yeah.
I love that. I mean, I think that you just said something so important, right? Which is that relationships are worth fighting for, and they're hard, right? I think oftentimes we get enamored with the idea of novelty, right? And so whether that's a romantic relationship or a work relationship or whatever it is, right? It's just like, hey, is this new? Is this fun? Is this something, whatever? But it's like when you actually get down to it, it's like, hey, when you work through that novelty phase and that wears off, and you're actually getting into the kind of intimacy phase of like, I know these people and they know me, right? That can be really hard, and it can be really vulnerable, and it's so worth fighting for. And it's absolutely, that's such a wonderful thing to be proud of, at least in my perspective. So
thank you.
I did
that. When I was getting certified in Enneagram, I'm a 7, so it's an enthusiast. So you're always looking for a party. And when I got cataplexy and I'm paralyzed, right, I was trapped, which for an enthusiast is like torture. Yeah. But as I did the work through this awesome exercise that they put me through, it was like actually by having cataplexy, it pushed me to ask for help, which created connection, which created freedom. And so every obstacle in front of us is just another opportunity for us to get deeper and get to what we really want. It's not actually in our way, it's actually paving the way. And so like that kind of eye-opening stuff, the things I used to resist, I'm learning to lean into and see them as gifts, because it used to really frustrate me. I'd be like, wow, why can't this just be a party right now?
Totally.
So yeah, I appreciate that about just getting old. I
Yeah.
think it's just getting old and being like, okay, I got to lean into these. So having the tools to lean into it and the people around me to help me lean into it has been like probably my greatest blessing.
There you go. Well, I would say it's just becoming wise, not becoming old, because I've met tons of old people who are not necessarily wise, right? And so
True.
there's a
That's
difference
true.
there. And I would say that you are doing a good job of reflecting on your experience and turning that experience into wisdom. So there you go.
Well, thank you.
So we've talked about this with this. This is our idea has already come up, but I would love for you to make it concrete for our listeners. So let's talk about making dental care more human. And I would love for you to think about this both from your perspective of, hey, building RevTribes and helping other people, but then also having them take this back to their patients. What's one thing that you do routinely to make your work and your job more connected or rooted? What's like an action, something maybe on your calendar,
Yeah.
whatever, that's like, hey, this is something that I do specifically to ground myself in that relational reality that we've been talking about.
Okay, so I have like a first aid kit. It's a glittery notebook. It's like it's awesome, right? And it has all these tools in it. And I could go off on about those, but I'll tell you one that's like really fast that I actually got from a speaking coach, and it was for speaking, but I actually use it for all my interactions. So my speaking coach told me, he's like, when you stand on stage to get out of your head and into your heart, you look at every single person and you say, I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you. And anytime I feel my ego coming up and I start treating people like objects, which is like, because I'm very goal oriented. So it's like, right. I pause and I just say, I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you. And now all of a sudden it's like, I'm just going to show up the best that I can, but it's because I care about you and I'm not going to be thinking about myself. And that exercise, like when I look at my calendar and I have anxiety, like, oh, I'm freaking out, or I'm going to go meet this person, and what if I screw up, whatever, all that ego stuff. I just look at my calendar and I envision each person. It's like, I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you. And now when I show up, it's a more anchored place of my intention, so I can communicate that better. And I've spent a lot of time trying to figure out how do I communicate my intentions, and that exercise has helped me.
Wow, that's really beautiful, and I think we can learn a lot. I can learn a lot from that. So I think we all can. So thank you for sharing. That's a really great practical tip. I think allows us to take ourselves out of ourselves, which it seems to be a theme of this episode of Kind of Different here, which I love. One last question here. You've talked about some of the ways that which you've benefited from some medical care throughout the course of your life, and hey, like here's this medication that really helps change the way that I think about this. But obviously that involved working within the healthcare system. When you think about yourself as a patient, what's one thing that a care team does for you that really helps build your trust? When you're like, hey, I don't know if I trust you or not. Maybe I'm just meeting you. Maybe I've been here for a little bit, but I don't know how deep that relationship is. What's something that when you think of yourself as a patient, the care team does that helps you trust them more?
Um, the biggest thing that I see is listening.
Mm.
It's tough. It's tough to listen. It's tough to listen in and out of healthcare, right? But meeting people where they're at. And so when my favorite, there's not a lot of cures for my diseases, very limited.
Yeah.
And I've got this neurologist, and he's quite a bit older and stuff. But the thing I loved about him is at every appointment he just sits and he just lets me be, because he knows there's no cure.
Yeah.
So he just like lets me be.
Mm-hmm.
And like is interested. And I think like, would I show up that way? I don't know. I'd be like, yeah, Jodi, it's the same as it was a year ago. Good luck out there,
Yeah.
But he just lets me be, and he asks about my life and about, what I'm going through. I don't know why I'm so Matt, you're just like a safe person or something. I don't know, you just make me cry. But I just like, he just lets me be. And I think like, how often do we just let people be in healthcare? And I
Yeah.
mean, I remember in the call center when the moms would call and they'd be screaming,
Mm.
and they were my favorite ones to talk to because even though I didn't speak Spanish, like the English ones, right? I'd be like, transfer them to me if you can. And those few phone calls, like it was just, if you just let people be, it's amazing what it does for them.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what kind of relationships they have outside of that office. You don't know why do they feel safe, communicating with you. Like that's a gift if somebody feels safe communicating with you. And so when I've shown up and somebody's made it safe, like I think that's a huge gift. And if we can give that to other people, I think you really change people's world in a meaningful way.
Yeah.
A meaningful way. I can't tell you how many times I've seen that in healthcare where
Mm.
the mom's yelling at you because she just got yelled at. So
Yeah.
she's just not safe to yell anywhere else except for maybe at you. So just like to be, and then flip that into like empathy and just watch that melt away. It's just amazing.
That's really beautiful. Are you a Beach Boys fan at all? We started off talking about the Beatles, and we'll talk about Beach Boys here for a minute.
Yes, and I watched the documentary and it was amazing.
They're so good, right? I love it. And that song on Pet Sounds, "Don't Talk, Put Your Head on My Shoulder." It's a really beautiful song that I think a lot of times as professionals we might think about as like, oh, my job is to be the one to like let their head be on my shoulder. Like, don't talk, put your head on my shoulder. Like, I will take care of you. But I think what you're saying here almost is that our job often as healthcare professionals can be to be the one who's not talking and just to kind of put our head on our shoulder, like the person's shoulder, and to let them, share, to let them open up, to let them talk. I think it flips it for me a little bit in terms of what I see my job as sometimes, and what that can do for that relationship. So if that analogy helps anyone out there, like it's helped me, maybe that's good. But if not, then you just got Beatles and the Beach Boys in the same
Hey, like you're at least a little bit smarter than you were when we started, so that's awesome. I would say like maybe the principle, if we were to label it, would be like co-create the experience with the people around you. And don't try to just dictate exactly what it should be. Like be there and be like, we're together in this. And I know that you can't always do that, but if there's a moment where you really need to do that because they need you to do that, like pause and do that for like that one person. So
I love it. Oh man. We could have a whole episode about co-creation, and maybe we will. Absolutely love it. Thank you for sharing, Jodi. So we want, in the interest of keeping this in hey, like someone can listen to it in a community. I have a ton more questions for you, but we're gonna just say, hey, let them get in touch with you if they want to get in touch with you, if they want to find out more about RevTribes, what you're doing, how you're helping people build people. What's the middle one again?
People Vision Systems. But here's the thing, superpowers. I will do that for free. You take your Colby, I'll hang out with you all day long and I'll help you figure it out. Like I love it. So that's what I can do for them. And
so how do they get in touch with you if they want to find out more? What's the best ways for them to find out more?
Jodi at RevTribes.com. Or you can go to my LinkedIn and message me, or Facebook Messenger. Like you just message me and I'll hang out with you.
I absolutely love it. We gotta finish with this because I just realized this too. So we've talked about RevTribes, but we haven't said the word, right? Revolutionary Tribes, which is the full name, right? Of is it Revolutionary Tribes, right? And to finish this podcast on more Beatles, right? We got John Lennon being, you say you want a revolution. I'm a terrible singer, but you know what? Hey, like, I hope all of you listeners out there want a revolution after this, and a revolution that is rooted and grounded and self-aware and self-forgetful in all the best ways, just like Jodi has described to us today. Jodi, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us. We are all better people for having been able to listen to you for 30 minutes. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Matt. And I love
Have
the
a great
singing.
day.
Keep it up.
Yeah,
all
for
right.
sure. Bye.